Hello and welcome back to Hollowponds Solo Sagas. So today we're going to do another how-to video, and what I was thinking about is what games I ideally would like to play, but it's very hard as a solo player. And one of those genres is a superhero game. I mentioned Golden Heroes last week, and I've been thinking about various other things, and I played the original Marvel superheroes role-playing game, but it works well with the DM playing the villain. Another genre that I've always enjoyed, and I watched Buffy, you have Monster of the Week. But again, with the Buffy type of scenario, the Buffy type of story, you need a villain. Now, how do you play a villain, a good villain, as a solo player? How can you represent the machinations of a good villain, a super villain, or the big bad, as a solo player? And I've been going through thinking about different ways of doing that, and I've put some notes together. And my aim is to try and create a set of tools that we can use as solo players that could then portray a villain without going soft on ourselves or playing the meta game. So that's my aim for this video, and I will attempt to then take, because it might be long, there's loads of notes here, to put it into a trifold as I've been doing, or maybe incorporate in some other stuff that I'm working on. So how do we portray a really good villain? Now, the first thing that we have to do, and when you look at a lot of the villains who are in our stories, a lot of the villains who are the opponents, the Ultrons, or the Buffy big bags, you have the Master and various other things, or even the Master, Doctor Who. The main thing that we focus on is actually the main character, the players, the character. So your character, your main character, if you have a cadre, a little group of people, then some of their main personalities or skills, or mainly you're looking at your main character. So you want to start your villain looking at your PC. You want to look at your player character, and you want to look at your main character, your protagonist. What are their goals? Because your villain, your good villain, is opposing the goals of the hero. So what are the three main goals that you could come up with? I always like threes. The three main goals that you can come up with for your hero. So what could we think of? We could think of a Spider-Man as a superhero. Spider-Man wants to keep his secret, wants to look after his family, Aunt May, and wants to make a difference. Those are the main goals of our Spider-Man. Buffy wants to be young and still be a teenager. Buffy wants to make sure evil doesn't rise up, and then we've got Buffy's got her mum at the beginning series, then Dawn later on. So there are the family ties, and also her extended family. She cares for her extended family. We have some main goals. You want to find the three main goals of your player character. And once you've made those goals, you want to think of each of those goals, looking after those things, and create a pressure point out of those goals. A thing that causes the tension and causes the pressure in that goal for each one of those three. And then a counter goal. So for your villain should be attacking those goals. And you should have mechanisms, and we'll talk about the mechanisms to do that, to attack those goals. So we want to expose Spider-Man's true identity. We want to find Spider-Man's true identity. We want to attack Spider-Man's family, Aunt May. We want to stop Spider-Man from making a difference. You know, we want to attack Buffy's extended family, Buffy's close family. We want to stop her from having a normal life. We want to allow the evil to excel. The goals and then the counter goals. That then gives us our bases for our villain. And for each of those counter goals, i.e. the goal, we want to know, does our villain at the moment know about this? And that's where you can draw upon oracles of various other things. So that then gives us our foundations. What are our goals of our player? What are our counter goals? And does our villain know about these things? The next thing you want to make sure to do, so as you don't go light on yourself, is do your villain a character sheet. Do your villain a character card. Rather than a character sheet with statistics, you want a card with, and this is where I'll refer to my notes a bit more. You want to make sure that you know your main villain's drive, what method they use, what resources they've got, weaknesses that you might want to put down, although some weaknesses may come out with your narrative as you go along, and some escalation path lines. Now, I talk about this for the solo in Sablewood, for the factions. You have clocks that then escalate, and how we're going to track these is we're going to create clocks, drama clocks, for these elements of our villain. Now, our villain has an overall goal. You would expect that your villain has some sort of plan. Bring vampires into the world. Thanos, the dividing everybody, so making sure that there's enough resources for everyone. We have Ultron with the controlling. There is a main goal that you want your villain to have, your big bad, for your overarching story. Write that one down, and then you have a clock, which is the progress towards that plan, the big plan. You have another clock, which is going to be a heat clock. Now, this is how much pressure your villain is putting on you. So you want to track it. So maybe at the beginning of your campaign, the villain isn't really showing themselves very often, but as that clock ticks on, the villain becomes more dominant within your storylines, and the villain then will then organically become a bigger part of your story as that clock moves on. And you want a third clock. Now, the third clock depends on what type of villain you are thinking of having as the person in your story. The archetype of the villain. Now, there are several archetypes. I've gone through thinking of all the ones I can think of. There are several villain archetypes that you can have, and that would be your third. Oh, hold on, and I missed one bit. On the table, how do you increment the clocks? Every time you approach a new scene, or a new scene for your story, and you're describing a thing. So if you're using Mythic and you roll and it's an external scene, so your player is involved, you still do this. If it's a player having a small interaction in a new environment, a new scene, you do this. Every time your story progresses by a scene, so if you're writing a story, every time you're cutting to a new scene, every time you're describing a new thing, every time you have a flashback, one of those clocks progresses. One of those three clocks progresses. You can randomly decide which one, or you can see how the story goes, or you can ask an oracle, but one of those clocks progresses. How many boxes do you have in a clock? For your main process plan, I would say 9 boxes. 3 tiers of escalation. Final 9 boxes, the big bad is in charge. Ultron has taken over. And then you're going to need to change your story to say what happens after. Thanos, at the end of those 9 boxes. That's what happened. The 9 boxes, Thanos did that, and then we need a new story, which is how to undo it. So each scene, we progress one of our boxes. Now we'll go to the archetypes. Do apologise. The third clock depends on what type of villain you have. Now, this is where I went through. So I've got several archetypes here. I think, though I haven't numbered them yet, and I won't do that right now, I think there's about 7. So, first one, you have a Mastermind. Now, your Mastermind is a genius archetype. This is a genius villain. Now, this as a solo player, what you should feel like is that when you're doing things, the random rolls and your oracle and your clocks for your villain means your plans are being intercepted. So you want your plans to be intercepted, you're too late for things. You always feel that something else is happening in the background. This, you want a clock, which I've called a web clock. So as a web clock feels, we want to then discover parts of the Mastermind's plan, which is the plans within the plans. So when you do something and the story starts to roll, if the Mastermind clock triggers, you want to think about what you're doing and how your villain could be undoing it. You want to think of a story that's counter to your story. So just let it tick along, say 4 boxes, 5 boxes per iteration. Just let that Mastermind clock, the web clock, tick along. And then every time you hit your max boxes, you have to then think, okay, what am I doing at the moment? And how could this plan have been undone or foreseen? And then what you're really doing is you're masterminding against yourself, but you're letting it sit in the background. And then as your overall plan, the first clock ticks on, you want to make those boxes less often, so it happens more often for the Mastermind. He'll be playing with your plans more often. And I've also I wrote some rough tables, so you want to randomize what they're doing. So for instance, I'll show you this one, and then I won't go through so much detail for the other ones of this. You want a moves table for each one of your villains archetypes. So you want to come up with a table that you can randomly roll against to decide what your villain is going to do when the clocks trigger, when their separate clocks trigger. So for instance, this is what I've written down for a Mastermind. A D6, just using a D6 table, because you don't want too many, because then you've got to come up with too many different sorts of things. One, frame one of your allies. So something happens to one of your allies and they get framed. So we could bend this into our Netrunner story. If we had a culprit bad guy who was a mastermind, a genius, or an AI which is running something in the background of our Netrunner story, framing an ally would be Miriam getting framed for the hack. That's how we would play out that plan. 2, move the goalposts. So whatever you were doing at the moment, all of a sudden your fixer gets in touch with you and says, no, we don't want you to do that now. We don't want you to break in and get that thing from the shelf. We want you to go in and drop this data in. And you're in the middle of a run. But because the clock ticked, that's when you're going to actually trigger this one. 3, reveal a decoy. All of a sudden you realise, so Spider-Man realises that he's been tracking down this package of uranium that's gone missing, and realises that that wasn't even a real thing. That's a decoy for a robbery which is occurring somewhere else. 4, hire a proxy. You realise that the person who you've been dealing with, or the criminal that you have been dealing with, is actually being run by the Mastermind. And they, because you've captured them, or something happens, and that's how you end up with that bit. 5, burn a resource. The Mastermind gets the Mastermind gets access to. So we'll go with the Spider-Man that makes his own web fluid, not the Toby Spider-Man who shoots the web fluid out of himself. We'll use that metaverse one, the one that makes the fluids. You can't get access to those chemicals anymore. Someone has bought up all of those chemicals, and for some reason they've all gone away because that resource is then burnt. Or 6, leave a tempting clue. So you write into your story that all of a sudden you get a letter, or something's in the news, or something's happening, because the Mastermind is beginning to create more and more plans to sink you into a trap. The Mastermind. So we won't do the clocks for everyone else. I've written down, but I'm not going to do it because I don't think I'm going to have enough time. The next type of archetype would be more of a tyrant. So a tyrant wants to control things, wants to set checkpoints, curfews, wants to make you as a player feel squeezed. So each time that clock ticks, you want to have an oppression clock for your third clock. So each one of those, you want to add in a complication to your story. So either travel might be harder, or trade might be harder, or they might clamp down on the type of medical resources you can get. So healing is harder. Or if you're doing it in a fantasy world and you want a fantasy setting, also with Buffy, with modern magic, magic becomes harder to cast. So every time, so your skill rolls, your difficulty rolls for a certain type of thing will increase, because the tyrant is clamping down on you and trying to control things. It's a bit like the Mastermind. So the Mastermind and the tyrant is mostly off screen. They won't show their face to you very often, and you only want to really catch them when their progression clock for their overall plan, the first clock, has knocked down a bit. That's when they might start showing their face more, because they're starting to feel more confident that their plans are going on. Up until that point, even you as a solo player, basically you have to be your own DM for this, don't you? Which mostly is what we do. Up until that point, you don't let the Mastermind or the Tyrant show themselves on screen. The next one is more of a bully archetype. This is more personal. So whereas the others are more city-wide or more wider, the bully, you want to be humiliating your character. So a bully archetype humiliates. So each time their third clock is a bully clock. They're going to go after your character personally and directly. They want to publicly humiliate. They want to publicly attack your equipment and your kit. They want to destroy your reputation. But instead of just taking, so basically it would be, instead of taking those chemicals out of the market wide, they would be directly telling people to stop selling to you. You are being directly, though the chemicals are still on offer, you can't get hold of them. So the bully targets you directly. They might try to do ambushes, they might try to do something. Basically, every time you win, they want to see you lose. So if the bully starts to clock, they're going to be attacking you directly. Next one, a mirror image of you. Basically, it's someone who wants to be you. It could be, what was it, Mr. Incredible? Thingy Lee, Jason Lee's character in The Incredibles. They want to be you, and they begrudge you the fact that you have what you have and they don't have it. They are the mirror image of you. So because of that, when you do something, when their clock ticks, you'll find in the news that somebody else has done something similar and try to trump it. Try to trump your stuff with their stuff. Diminish your story with theirs. Theirs would be more a wedge clock, trying to block you in and wedge you out. So every time their clock ticks, they will keep going, but they might cross some lines that you never would, suggesting that you are or you're not. They are trying to squeeze you out. So possibly they might try and, on their moves, they might try and achieve the same thing you're doing, but using cruel methodologies. They might offer you an alliance and you don't really realise what they're doing yet. It depends how far deep down their overall plan they are in the clock. You will basically want to look at those 3 clocks and how they're progressing and judge what you're doing based on those and how you progress them. Next one. The next one, I quite like the next one. I was thinking about this one. This is more like the Idealist. This is your paladin, but your corrupt paladin. This is Thanos. Thanos was trying to do what Thanos thought a good thing, was an idealist, but a corrupted idealist. You've got the other, I can't remember the character's name or their name, not Captain America, so not Steve Rogers, the other one. The one that took Captain America's place, because in the comics Captain America killed someone because a bullet reflected off of their shield and it killed someone, so they basically quit the job. The dude who took over is a corrupted idealist. They think they are doing the right thing, but their views and their methodologies are corrupted. It's like an angel turned bad if you're going for the Buffy thing. So you want them to feel righteous, but their methodologies are horrific. So you want a clock, I've called it a sanctimony clock. As that clock progresses, they become more extreme, but you want them to be an extreme paladin. So you want their methodologies to be legitimized in as much as possible in the way that they talk about them. Now these ones, like the corrupted idealist, the mirror image and the bully, you're going to see on screen. You want to introduce into your story on screen early and then build it up as their overall story builds up. So they become more, but you know who they are from early days in your story. The corrupted idealist is quite, you could see it's quite fun. It's Thingy from Boys, The Boys, him. So you've got that he could, say he, but the person, they, could rally a crowd for one move, sacrifice the few for the many in another one, take over a sacred site because they see it as being corrupted or whatever. That's the sort of thing that they would do. So that's the idealist, the corrupted idealist. We then have the archetype, which is more the unstoppable force. They are a god in all intents and purposes. You want a doom clock, because what they are doing is more apocalyptic. We have their bits of the map could change because they are re-sculpting the landscape. Weather could change. you could decide that they can actually change the fabric of space and time, thus the rules change. Certain things can change when that main clock, so we can call this the doom clock, ticks over a new thing. So you can actually have this as part of your moves roll. So you can say like they spawn lesser beings in the world, like the flying monkeys. They corrupt what would be a safe area. They remove a certain resource just from the universe, from the game. They are an unstoppable force. You could have those on screen, or they could come more out of omens and that other people are speaking, and so there's feelings, there's that a feeling of dread. So whereas, I don't know how into the whole, the woo, as we call it at home, the UFOs, the awakening that seems to be happening within which is mentioned in, anyway, the echo chamber that I live in, that there's a feeling that something big is going to happen and it's going to be a change. I could go into all my conspiracy theories now, but I won't waste time because I've already got 20 minutes done by this clock. It could be the same but the inverse. So within your game, people are more talking about, as that clock ticks, the final clock, the doom clock ticks over. So you could do it again to start with 5 squares, 4 squares, 3 squares, 2 squares. More often people are talking about things that are happening. And I think, so though all of these so far, as we've incremented through, they've become more and more, less in the background and more predominant from the beginning of your story. The final one really, as an archetype for a villain, is just evil. They are evil personified. They are the worst of the worst. Their clock can be a damage clock or a harm clock or a trail of burning, a trail of fire. Wherever they go, they leave carnage behind. They are marked by cruelty. So it all depends how you like telling stories and how you tilt. But that villain is an evil, cruel villain. So all of their moves are the worst things you could do within the clock. And as that clock ticks, they are becoming more powerful and being able to influence things more and more clear and present danger to your story. So it all depends how you go. So I wouldn't play one of those ones, but I thought I should include it. Within anything, probably a fantasy world, I would play that. Maybe you could edge it into a bit of sci-fi, but I think in a superhero type thing, you want to go more for the Tyrant-y type feel rather than evil, pure evil personified. But that is sort of like the cap of your villain, evil personified. Now you don't have to just keep one of those archetypes. You can mix and match those archetypes around. You can take a bit of this and a bit of that. So you don't necessarily, I would say 3 clocks is enough to track, but you can stick a 4th. So you can have these 2 different type of archetypes of what they're doing. They may be drawn between the 2. They may be a bully and evil, or they may be an unstoppable force and a mastermind. And so at the beginning of the story, they stay out and then they start to get more aware of themselves and come out more. So you want to mix them about a bit. And you need to have a process that you stick to. And I would suggest the following. You define a new scene. You define what your scene's going to be, and then you increment one of the clocks. You randomly decide one of the clocks and you increment. If the clock triggers, you progress a part of that. So if it's your overall plan clock, you say once row 1 is filled, we then have an escalation event. Row 2, escalation event. Row 3, the final event, and your story changes. You see whether your trigger fires and then your scene triggers, and then you can play the scene you wanted. If it is your individual archetype, you will then roll on your moves and then decide what is going to happen because of that clock triggering. You then frame that scene based around your scene that you're going to do based around the additional information. You might be able to do a cutaway scene to show what has happened with the incrementing threat, or you might incorporate that into what you're going to do anyway, because that might be something that you can easily twist into because that's what happened. You then can do your standard cycle, then can begin there. you've set your scene, you ask the Oracle some questions, you play through based on the answers to those questions, you then resolve that scene, you then repeat. So, you know, set scene, ask questions, resolve scene, repeat. And that was where you'll just tick around, filling in those clocks, and then having those solo surprises come out. And hopefully that then is a framework to allow us to play a superhero villain on our own, still get those surprises and still feel as though there is this overwhelming threat that is growing within our world, within our created world and our story, that we don't wholly know what's going to happen next. We know where the enemy may be going, but we don't know where. Now we can do. So I thought of doing this. So sometimes I have asked either my youngest or Mandy to do something and then not tell me what it is and hide it, and then I will then uncover that as I'm playing. You can do the same thing. You can have, for your villain, for your archetype, you can write down some things. It's kind of like I did in Twilight 2000, where I took the things that could happen next and I wrote them all into little pieces of paper, folded them up and stuck them in a bag. In that last season of Twilight 2000, I shook them and I pulled one out. You can do that with your villain. So you don't know, so you can say, this is what I think my villain would do. Some of the things that my villain would do. And you can put them on a piece of paper, put them in a bag and pull them out, write them down on a table and then roll it. So it's like the moves, but with more detail. So an actual thing that the villain might do. And then if as your story progresses, you can think up more, fold them up, stick it in the bag. So whatever the villain does next within your story and where your story goes, you don't really know what's going to happen. You know what might happen, but you don't know what's going to happen. So that then can add that bit in if you want. Now I didn't go into that much detail previously because I didn't know how well that would work with some people, but that's the thing you can try as well. So, recap. Define your villain up front. Write down your villain's goals, your villain's purpose, and your villain's archetype. Decide on some clocks, some drama clocks. I like drama clocks. Decide on some drama clocks that you can then define for that villain and then track those drama clocks as you go. Every time you have a scene, increment one of those clocks. Every time one of those clocks triggers, alter your scene and make your scene represent what that clock was that's just triggered. Randomize what your archetype villain is going to do so you don't know. Unless it's clear and present from the story what's going to happen, randomize it. Don't go lenient on yourself so as your hero succeeds. If Thanos clicks, your story changes and you go a new way. If Thanos hadn't clicked, we wouldn't have had the story that we had. So he had to win to allow the story to change. So don't not let your villain win. But of course, don't let them go unpunished. And that's basically it. Hopefully that covers it. If I've missed anything or you think there's anything that I should have included, then do stick it down in the comments and then we can discuss how you run villains or how we can incorporate villains and that missing piece when you're just being a solo player. I think that's it really. I'll try and stick that down on some paper so it's a bit easier to consume and hopefully everybody has a nice villain. I'm going to try playing a superhero game soon. Thank you so much for watching. If you are a subscriber, thank you very much for being a subscriber. If you're not yet a subscriber, do consider subscribing. It allows the world to know I exist and it, you know, it's lovely, isn't it? Thank you so much to the Adventurers Guild for all your support. If you'd like to support me, you can join the Adventurers Guild, which is joining the YouTube membership. We also have Patreon for stuff that I'm writing, the books that I write, or there's Coffee Thank You, or the Superfan Thank Yous. All of it helps me financially, and based on the fact I was made redundant back in April, that would be lovely. And I'm also moving, which is really troubling. That's it really, I'll leave you be. Thank you so much for your time. See ya.